This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group, your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a distinguished guest, and his name is George Abraham. He's blind, but he has a phenomenal achievement to his credit. He became visually impaired when he was 10 months old. He's working tirelessly to bring hope to the lives of other visually impaired people. He's keeping the hope alive and well. And he's now a social entrepreneur, an inspirational speaker and communicator. Welcome to our show, George. Thank you very much for coming to our show.
Thank you for having me on your show, Dr. Frank Islam. It's a privilege and an honor. I run SCORE Foundation, which is an...
Yeah, I will ask you the question. So before you go further, so what I wanted to talk to you about, tell us, our global audience, a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your journey, and your story, and also shed some bright lights on the SCORE Foundation that you've established. Tell us how this foundation is helping the community and the society at large.
Well, I was born a good 6 decades ago, and at about 10 months of age, I had meningitis, which is normally a killer. And I was lucky to survive meningitis, but I lost my optic nerves and part of my retina, which meant that I was almost blind from the age of 10 months. And I had the good fortune of having parents who were extremely positive and optimistic and enlightened. And they kind of believed that I should get the best possible education. And they sent me to a mainstream school, though the ophthalmologist had very clearly told them that I would need to be sent to a special school. But my mother was very clear. She said that we will cross the bridge if and when we get to it.
Very well said.
And so I went to La Martiniere Girls' School. That's where I started my schooling in Lucknow.
Right.
And then moved to Frank Anthony Public School in Delhi, and then eventually passed out in 1976 from Kendriya Vidyalaya with humanities, with mathematics.
Okay, wonderful.
And then I came to Delhi to join St. Stephen's College, where I did my honors in mathematics and an MA in operations research, and joined the advertising industry. Worked for close to 8 to 9 years in advertising. And that's when I had the privilege or the opportunity, I would say, of visiting a school for the blind. And what I saw there kind of clearly told me how fortunate I was. I was indeed blessed to have had the opportunities that my parents gave me. I had no real close contact with people with vision impairment before that. I had a couple of friends in college who were visually impaired, but I didn't think too much of vision impairment at that point of time, meaning it wasn't an issue that I really thought about then.
Right.
But when I visited the school in 1988, 89.
And which school is this, George?
I wouldn't want to name the school, but
Okay.
it was a school in the capital. And what I saw there clearly told me how lucky I was. And what I saw there was that people were literally languishing in substandard conditions. Substandard because the kind of building was run down,
Right.
the kind of facilities offered were poor, there was no accountability, education curriculum was compromised, and the teachers that I met and interacted with, didn't have any kind of faith and belief in their students. Because when I asked them, what are these kids going to do after they pass out? And the answer was simply this: they are blind, what can they do?
Oh,
And
but that's just a totally
that's really sad.
unacceptable because they have so much to give.
Absolutely. And I immediately juxtaposed my own life and the journey I had. So that day I told my wife that, I think we are being challenged, and I would like to do something with people like me, and that's where
Okay.
my journey with blind people began, and my work in the domain of life with blindness began. I was very clear that I would take up work that I would be passionate about, and work that would make a difference, and make work that would bring excitement to the lives of blind people.
Very well said.
And I had a background in after mathematics and operations research in the university. I had 8-9 years of advertising experience also. So that's where I was in 1989, 88, 89.
Okay.
Of course, the big question then was, what is it that I wanted to do? Because I
Right.
had absolutely no clue as to what this domain needed, what this domain,
Right.
what was going on in the domain, and what would I be actually able to do.
So tell me a little bit about the foundation, George. What are the goals and objectives are, and how successful have you been with this foundation to help people to succeed?
Well, if I were to very briefly answer that question, the foundation believes in the potential of blind people.
Sure.
We believe that every blind person is potentially part of the human resource of our country, and they need to be invested in rather than just provided for
Correct.
or looked after. So and I also realized that the people in the country, people in fact I might even widen the scope, people in the world tend to focus on the blindness or the disability and totally overlook the human being that there is. So the whole idea of the mission of the organization is to take up work which creates personal independence, economic self-reliance, and personal independence.
Very well said. So
So
there is
if
a
I might just,
school.
I just like to
Well, one more
repeat
thing. Yeah,
this.
go ahead. Go ahead. Please go
I
ahead.
like to just repeat this: personal
Sure.
independence, economic self-reliance, and social inclusion.
Very well said. As
Yeah,
you know, there is a school at Aligarh Muslim University where I went when I was a student, and I have been a generous contributor to Frank and Dev Islam Management Complex at AMU. They have a blind school, and they'll welcome people like you to go there and talk to them, and I can connect you with the right person.
yeah. The Ahmadi School for the Blind.
Right. Correct.
I've been there a few times in the
Okay.
1990s. I
Okay.
have done workshops there. I've also conducted a cricket tournament for the blind over there.
Very well. Very
This
nice.
was
Thank
when
you.
Mr. Faruqi was the vice chancellor
Okay.
of the university at that time.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you have been there.
sure.
I wanted to ask you, India has the fifth of the worst visually impaired population. Do
That's
you
right.
believe that the problems and challenges have been neglected over the years? Or what can be done to help people with the visual impairment so that they can lead a normal and fulfilling life?
I would not say, or I would not use the word neglected. I
Okay.
would say that the approach has been probably wrong. Uh, Number one, I think the population of visually impaired people, as you said, 20% of the world's blind population, that amounts to close to 5.4 million as far as the Indian National Census 2011 goes, though the WHO puts that figure at 62 or 63 million. So let's not debate about the numbers. The numbers are simply too large. That's number one. Number two, as I said earlier, the tendency of most people is to look at the disability and respond to that disability and totally forget the fact that this person is a potential human being.
Sure.
So parents do not know how to respond to a child who is diagnosed with blindness. Medical school do not teach ophthalmologists how to deal with children or people who have been diagnosed with irreversible blindness. So ophthalmologists haven't a clue in most cases as to how to respond. Schools are unable to kind of respond. So I can just list the entire set of stakeholders, but the point is, people simply do not know how to respond to blindness. And even today, when people know that I have an eye problem, they ask me, "Haven't you seen a doctor?"
Have you
Uh,
seen a doctor?
yeah.
Of course you have.
So, so the first thought, and normally the last thought, is, can this be medically solved? This is often referred to as the medical model of dealing with blindness. But I believe that we need to shift to a social model of blindness,
Very well said.
where we need to kind of include people with vision impairment in the mainstream, which means that you got to treat them as any other person, and you need to look at what the person brings to the table rather than what he does not bring to the table.
Right.
And unfortunately, approach across the country has been to kind of look at that medical model, and and as a result, the potential of the blind person is totally overlooked, and investments have not been made in that direction.
Very well said. As you know, in the United States, we have a blind governor. I'm sure you know
Yes.
that. And we have a public infrastructure that are used to facilitate people who are blind or visually impaired. What lessons India can learn from our experience that will enable, empower, and educate the blind people in India?
Well, I think one of the things which now we have in India, which is similar to what happened in the US, is that in the US you have the American Disability
Mhm,
Law,
mhm.
and in India we have the Rights for the Persons with Disability Act, which is basically inspired by the United Nations Convention on Rights for Persons with Disability, which was passed by the UN, and India is a signatory to that convention. So we are kind of obliged as a nation to kind of harmonize all laws with the UNCRPD. Unfortunately, the problem is that the whole process of harmonization has been very slow. Uh, and even though policies and laws are in place, the implementations has been seriously hamstrung because of the implementing agencies and implementing professionals are unaware of the provisions of the law.
Right.
So when you go to a particular place and say, "Look, I'm visually impaired and I need admission in your school," by law you are meant to be given admission, but the school is not aware of the acts that compels them to give you admission, and they make you run around and you have to go and look for the act and then produce the paper. Whether it is employment, whether it is education, whether it is uh, even getting a small certificate, you're made to run around. And I think it's a complex problem. It's not just about not recognizing people with disability. I think the problem of number hits India at every level. Mixed with it, I think, unlike the US, we have widespread poverty. And there are a few examples where I think disability has been kind of taken on board, like the Delhi Metro.
Hmm.
And Delhi Metro is a good example of where, right from the planning stage, they recognized and accepted the fact that they will have consumers and customers who are going to be disabled. And as a result, they have put in facilities for blind and hearing impaired and physically challenged people to comfortably and independently use the facilities. And as
So,
a result, metros in Bangalore, in Chennai, Calcutta, and Mumbai, and Cochin also have these facilities.
so it's the
So
right
that's a good.
step in the right direction.
Yes, but I think given the size of the country, it's been rather slow going.
Yeah. You need to
Having
educate
said that,
them. You need
having
to
said
educate them.
this, yeah, having said this, I must say that when I came to the US and the Penn Station in New York,
Right.
I knew I was going to be traveling alone, and I called up the Penn Station in advance to
Right.
find out what is the kind of facilities available for
Right.
me.
Right. Right.
Believe me, I was shocked that I spent a good 2 hours speaking to different people in the railways set up
Right.
in New York, and none of them had a clue as to what kind of support services were available for people with disability at the Penn station.
It's very sad. We need to fix this
Yeah,
problem. I agree
yeah.
with you.
So
So
I think it's a problem which is not
it's a
just,
challenge. You're right. It's a challenge
yeah,
for
it's
every
not
country, including United States. And we
absolutely,
need to be
absolutely.
educated and not be ignorant. So
Yeah,
despite the lack of opportunities and facilities, persons with blindness have been successful, as you know, in many professions, according to the Your Foundation.
yeah.
How they have risen despite all the handicaps, and how do we go about changing our attitudes toward the disabilities? And
I
that's
think
the question that we all need to kind of figure it out, what we need to do to educate people who are ignorant.
when you look at the absolute numbers of people who have actually managed to live independent, successful, dignified lives, that number is extremely small.
Yeah.
But I think they are sufficient evidence to let the world know that if opportunities are given to a person with vision impairment, he can rise to the occasion.
Yes.
So I think the people that we are talking about are people, A, who have been born into families who have believed in their disabled child. It's, you also have examples of people who probably grew up in very difficult conditions, but were determined to establish themselves as somebody who could achieve. There's a friend of mine in Mumbai who grew up in a very humble setup, but he got the right kind of education. But more importantly, he was he had a dream, and he pursued that dream, and he
Wonderful.
succeeded. And today he's a senior official with the Tata Consultancy Service in Mumbai.
Very well.
So there
Now,
are several such people. Then there are lawyers who are practicing in the Delhi High Court,
and they are
uh,
blind.
and they are blind. And the point is that they have actually struggled. They didn't give up.
You're absolutely right. So,
So people
so
are different.
they continue to be the model for the next generations of the blind
Absolutely,
people. That's a
absolutely.
wonderful thing to do. I know you mobilized blind cricket here and organized the first World Cup for the blind. That's wonderful. How did this happen, and what was the outcome of this? And what was it?
Okay, I grew up as like you from India, and so you know that India is cricket is probably the fifth or sixth religion in India,
I guess
and
so.
I grew up with the dream that I wanted to be a fast bowler for India because I grew up at a time when we didn't have any fast bowlers. And of course, my vision impairment stood in the way of me playing cricket beyond a certain point as a child growing up. So I was very disappointed. But when I visited Dehradun, when I was kind of looking around, as I said earlier, 1988, 89, I decided to do some work with the blind. So I started traveling around the country and educating myself about the sector. And I saw these kids playing cricket in Dehradun.
And
They
they
were
were
blind
blind.
kids. They were blind. They were using a ball
Wow.
that rattled.
Yes,
It was a
yes,
white
yes.
ball with plastic ball bearings inside,
Right.
and when the ball moves, it rattles. And then there are audio signals. But the game was so athletic. It was so there was so much of skill, and there was so much of passion. And seeing them, the dream of mine of being a fast bowler was rekindled, and I just felt that this was the project I should take up. So I started making more inquiries, and I decided to organize the first national tournament in 1990 in Delhi. And I approached Sunil Gavaskar and Kapil Dev and told them, this is my idea. What do you say? Of course, they said, we don't have the time. We are still playing cricket, but we will support you with our name. You can use our name. And that generated a lot of excitement in the country among blind schools and organizations working for the blind. And in December 1990, we had the first national tournament. I must point out another thing over here that normally activities for the blind is supported and sustained through donations. And
Okay.
I just felt that I was promoting cricket not because I wanted the blind to play the game, but I was trying to use the game to shift the focus on the talent and ability rather than the blindness. So I just felt that sponsorship recognizes the ability,
Hmm.
while donations and charity response is a response to the disability.
Very well said.
Yeah.
So,
So that's how
so
it's all
when
started.
was it and how successful was it?
Yeah, so this was the national tournament, and 8 years later, in 1998, we organized the first World Cup, which was
Okay,
held in Delhi.
that's wonderful.
And 7 countries participated. South Africa beat Pakistan in the finals,
Right.
and that was the first World Cup. It was called the Kanishka World Cup.
Okay. So, you continue to nourish and nurture the people who have the blindness, who have the disabilities. And the question that I have, what kind of campaign and crusade you have done or doing in order to empower the people with visual impairment so that they can have a passion and commitment and sustain themselves financially as well as contribute to the humanity that we need so desperately and regardless of who they are.
Uh, uh, Before I start answering the question, I just want to say that I realized very quickly through my cricket and travel across the country that the real problem was not the blindness, it was the mindset of people.
Is the minds of the people.
And mindsets are changed through awareness building,
Mhm.
through experience sharing,
Right.
and and showing the way in terms of how things could be done. So it was basically knowledge sharing and awareness creation. So given this, we decided to create a helpline,
Mhm.
because I felt that blind people need to know about possibilities and potential in their lives. Secondly, I also realized that the people around need to be sensitized. So that's how we launched Project Iway as a single stop knowledge resource. And we started producing radio programs and communication material in the media, as well as through face to face public programs. And people started calling us up. So,
Well, so education, making them aware have been a key
absolutely.
discriminator for
Yeah.
you.
So that's one.
Right.
Two, what I've realized is also with technology coming in,
Right.
and our Prime Minister calling for Digital India in 2014,
Right.
I realized there was a fantastic opportunity to create a level playing field, because blind people use computers using screen reading software.
Right. Right. Right.
And today, with all this artificial intelligence and
Mhm.
machine language and Internet of Things and so on, there are a lot of technologies coming into the world, which opens up doors for blind people. And with the government launching Digital India, it's a beautiful opportunity to bring technology and create access for blind people in the Digital India. So whether it's governance, whether it is communication, whether it's education, technology can open doors for blind people and create a level playing field. So that is the campaign that we are trying to drive, and that's the awareness that I'm doing, and I'm trying to mobilize other organizations to work along me to campaign for this, because Braille is considered to be the script which blind people use. But between you and me, I think Braille has finished its shelf life. It is digital literacy which is going to take the country forward, take blind people forward.
So,
So,
so George, my question to you is: you have a nonprofit organization. How do you sustain it? How do you go about raising the funds? If there are people who wants to make a contribution to your foundation, which I think is a noble cause, how do they go about contacting you in order for them to make a contribution to help you, to support you so that the people who are visually impaired can succeed in their lives?
We have been raising funds through crowdfunding, through donations, through funds from corporations, CSR money, that's corporate social responsibility.
Okay.
But the kind of work we're doing, and given the kind of issues that are there in our country, we have been struggling. So a simple word answer is, if anybody who is listening to this program or watching this program would like to donate or
Go
support
ahead.
us or help us, they can email me on georgeabraham0@gmail.com.
George
And
Abraham 0@gmail.com.
yeah, george.abraham0@gmail.com.
What about a website, George? Do you have any website that people can go to?
Yes, www.scorefoundation.org.in.
Okay. .n.
IN.
IN, which is India. Okay.
Yeah, I will just repeat it.
Sure. Go ahead.
www.score foundation foundation.org.in.
And thank you for people who are willing to contribute to this wonderful and also noble cause. And I hope your cause endures and your dream shall never die.
Well, thank you so much, and I do hope that people would watch this video and uh, connect and take this dialogue forward.
I agree with you. And you need to talk with the corporation, because what you have is several million, what I can say, who can buy their product and services. So that's the best way to engage them and get to know them. So thank you very much for our conversation. We deeply appreciate your kindness, your generosity, your inspiration to a lot of people, and thank you. Thank you for watching. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week.